What I love about Dune is the incredible thematic unity in its world building. There's an aimlessness sometimes in fantasy world building where it's like, here's a bunch of random rules and types of magic and some cultures I made up and some magical creatures. I'm gonna throw it all together and that's a fantasy world, right? And at first glance, it's kind of easy to write off Dune's world building like that. The slow blade penetrates his shield is probably the most gimmicky sounding of these world building elements. Just sounds like sort of a random rule to make the fighting seem slightly different. And then you have the voice thing, which is interesting, but it also just seems kind of random.
Give me the water.
This is more straight up magic, kind of disconnected from the rest of the more sci-fi-esque elements. And I know it's minor, but the pain box, I remember reading that scene for the first time and being like, what in the world is going on here? And then you have the sandworms, who are obviously super cool, super iconic, super epic, but still it's like, okay, we got worms. Where is the unity here? Still just sort of seems like a bunch of disconnected fantasy elements mixed together. But granted, this is kind of subjective. To me, there was the sense of similarity, not in what these elements were, but in kind of a tone of gravitas that they all had. Like there was some importance in the way the story was treating them, and that was what made me want to see if there was something deeper going on. So let's start with the slow blade penetrates the shield. Think about what that means practically. If that's a rule in this world, what does that mean I have to do when I'm fighting? Describe it to me. So you can imagine yourself in a fight, going nuts, going all out with your knife, and with your strength. You're moving as fast as you can. You're using every ounce of force you can muster because you need to. You need to be faster than the other guy. You need to be stronger than the other guy, or else that's it for you. You're gonna get killed. So you better be giving it everything you got, but then you find an opening. And now what happens? Well, now in this world, if you don't slow your blade, it won't penetrate the shield. So practically, what does that mean you have to do? It means from within that all-out mode, you now have to stop applying force. You need to withhold some of the strength you're applying. Not all of it. It's not the still blade that penetrates the shield. Now you need to adjust to that exact level of strength necessary to slow your blade while still applying the necessary force. And only by having that level of control will you win. So now hold that thought. Let's talk about the voice thing. What's the trick with that? This is something we see Paul failing at a couple times, and the advice his mom gives him is to find the right pitch to control his voice. And now think about the pain box. What was that about?
If you had been unable to control your impulses like an animal, we could not let you live.
So it's all about control. Don't cry, control your emotions. Don't shout, control your voice. Don't go all out in fighting, control your blade. By withholding some of the power that comes naturally, maybe it's counterintuitive, but that control can concentrate the power, can multiply it. It can enable you to work miracles with it, do things you never thought were possible. And of course, that's where this is all leading to the Fremen and the sandworms. The entire Fremen way of life is about this idea of increasing power not through release, but through discipline and control. They control their impulse to consume their limited resources. They control themselves from quenching their thirst completely, from drinking all their water. Their whole lifestyle is about conserving water, saving water, but they also don't hoard water completely, absolutely either. That would be giving into a different emotion, whether that's greed or stinginess or fear. So we see them, for example, having the spitting etiquette, which is wasting water, but in a controlled, intentional, limited way. We see that one of the ways they get moisture is from dead bodies, but they don't just kill anyone they meet. They exercise discernment and intentionality there as well. So again, it's not one extreme, it's not the other extreme. It's about controlling yourself from both ends of the spectrum to a disciplined, calculated midpoint. Sandwalking is another great depiction of this. This is where we see that it's truly in every aspect of their lives. Even in walking, it's about not letting loose and just doing as you please, but exercising control and intentionality there as well. And all of this whole way of life culminates in the ability to harness the power of the sandworms. That starts with calling them by signaling intentionality. It's not loud noises, it's rhythmic noises, intentional application of force. And then the actual feat of riding a sandworm requires the ultimate willpower in controlling your emotions, your fears, your anxieties, and of course controlling your body and your movement and your strength. And only if you can do all that, only if you can be all that, will you be rewarded with this ultimate power. That is the Fremen way, that is this concept of desert power. And with this, we have this new lens to understand Paul's arc. Paul's family is all about this idea of power through withholding and discipline. I think his father demonstrates this beautifully in the scene at the graveyard, where he's telling Paul about this idea of desert power for the first time, and informing Paul of his duties and what he has to do and what he has to grow up to be. And we kind of get the sense that Paul's dad is going to be the strict disciplinarian, but when he sees his son hesitate, Leto slows his blade, so to speak, and he says,
"Your grandfather said, a great man doesn't seek to lead. He's called to it." And he answers, "And if your answer is no, you'll still be the only thing I ever needed you to be. My son."
And we see that that approach indeed does penetrate, so to speak. It does the trick. That is what Paul needed to hear. That careful application of limited force was exactly what the situation called for. So this is the House Atreides ethos Paul is tasked with growing into. This is the mantle he has to take on. And the way this development happens isn't just by, a rocky training montage that's gets stronger. No, the development is tailor-made for the specific Atreides traits Paul must grow to embody. We see House Atreides wiped out, and Paul could let that vengeful rage take over. Every fiber of his being is telling him to throw himself at the Harkonnens, but instead he does what a true Atreides would do. He withholds, he withdraws. Not just what he does, not just what he feels, but who he is. He diminishes his own Atreides identity, and he submits himself to the Fremen people, the Fremen culture, the Fremen identity. And we see that manifest clearly through his relationship with the Fremen cause.
What will you have us do? Huh?
What would you do, Stolar?
I would strike even farther north.
Then I will go further north.
The further north you go, the more likely it is you die.
Atreides what I thought.
But it's also manifest through his relationship with Chani.
What's your secret name?
Sihaya. Means desert spring.
Desert Spring. I love it.
I hate it. It's from some stupid prophecy. I prefer Johnny.
I prefer Johnny too, then.
And I love that example with her name, not just because it feels so intimate and personal, but because it's packed with plot symbolism as well. The destiny of Paul Atreides is to become this grand leader, this political force, this vengeful warlord, all through the carefully controlled manipulations of his family. But at this point in the story, he's distancing himself from all of that. And here you have Chani's secret name, Desert Spring. That relates specifically to the prophecy that Paul's mother's faction has manipulated into the Fremen culture, and that's why Chani doesn't like it. So in agreeing with her opinion, Paul is aligning himself with Chani in a personal sense for the sake of their relationship. And then since this represents her northern Fremen ideology, he's submitting himself to that as well, in terms of where the plot is going. And then also, since that ideology relates directly to his own Atreides identity in a larger sense, just this small comment is showing him suppressing himself in that greater cosmic sense as well. But while this is happening, we get this beautiful ambiguity which comes so naturally from this Atreides control ethic, which is that it's hard to know sometimes if you're doing a really, really good job controlling some part of yourself, or if that controlling instinct is really giving into some other emotion. Paul's mom warns him that in his disciplined journey of learning desert power, he's actually become undisciplined and letting loose when it comes to love. And that's the first hint of Paul's arc taking the ominous turn it takes in part 2. There's another half to this equation. We've been avoiding talking about the elephant in the room, or the elephant-sized blobby man in the hot tub in the room. Dune isn't just about exploring this idea of empowerment through control, it's about the question, where does power come from? And one candidate, as we just talked about, is control, but that's something that feels scary to commit to. It's scary slowing down your blade and just having faith that your restraint will pay off in accordance with some abstract philosophical principle about how human power works. You're sacrificing a lot by doing that. So the other argument is to surrender completely to emotions. That emotional reservoir inside of you is the strongest source of power you have access to. Don't you dare limit that in any way. On the contrary, be a conduit for that energy. Let it burst forth from you. What you need to become, what you need to embody, is the most efficient medium to unleash the raw forces inside of you upon the world. That is the true path to power, not control, but total release. And that is the Harkonnen side of the debate. That is what the Harkonnens embody. They're not bad at self-control, they are anti-self-control. If they feel even a hint of violent, murderous emotion, they immediately indulge it. They let it take its course, they throw themselves into it. We see Robin embodying this primarily with his rage. With Fade Rotha, we see aggression and lust and perhaps a desire for thrills. And of course with the Baron, it's hedonism. That is everything he is. It's his gluttonous obesity. It's how we always find him lounging in his tub smoking. It's even in his weird floaty thing. We're seeing someone who's completely unbound by anything. And I think this is an association to Rome as well. Rome obviously was famous for its hedonism, the vomitoriums, the orgies, the Colosseum where we indulge in the most base, violent entertainment imaginable. And then we have the political greed, the conquering and taking more and more and more. The movie's color symbolism is a great representation of this as well. Harkonnen is black and white. It's embracing extremes, no middle ground. And then Atreides isn't bright colors, no, it's control. sold. With Atreides, we do get that middle ground. It's grays, it's beiges, it's golds, and same with the Fremen. So all this brings us to the final development we see for Paul in part 2. As we mentioned, his relationship with Chani mirrors his political military arc in that he cannot advance on his Fremen path without also moving towards an inevitable great letting loose. On a personal level, in the relationship arc, we see that with love, and in the political military arc, we see that with his inevitable journey south. This call to unleash the raw reserves of power waiting in the form of millions of southern fundamentalist Fremen. In other words, the more Paul tries to embrace his control-oriented desert power Atreides ethos, the more he moves towards what is in reality the Harkonnen ethos. And of course, once he does go south, that's when he learns the truth about what he is, that he is in fact a Harkonnen. The story is concretizing the meaning of his actions in his very identity, in his very blood. That is a rich climax. That is some great storytelling. I think the best part of this climax comes from the same tension we mentioned before. There's this built-in ambiguity. We don't know where Paul really ends up. When he's letting loose at the end of the second movie, it seems like he's going all out Harkonnen, but maybe we should look at it in the greater context of his entire journey. That this is the calculated, intentional, singular moment of release after months and months of control. We just don't know. We don't know if he's embracing his new Harkonnen identity, which he is a Harkonnen, or if he's embracing a mix of Harkonnen and Atreides, which he also is. Has he gone off the deep end, or is he still in control? It is a fascinating place to leave him, and it's only possible because of this brilliant thematic setup. Subscribe! What do you love about Dune's world building? There's obviously so much to talk about there. I'd love to hear what stood out to you. Please leave a comment and share your thoughts. Side note, but something that's fascinating for me is looking back at like the Aiel and Wheel of Time, who are basically the Fremen, or looking at Jabba the Hutt, who's very reminiscent of the Baron. And both these are vivid, unique characterizations that add variety and flavor to the world, but that's kind of all they are. Thematically, there's not really anything going on there. And you look at that and you compare it with Dune, where it's the same thing, but it's so tied into everything about the story thematically. It really is that same level of transcendent world building I talked about in the Last of Us video. It's just brilliant. It's so well done. Before I end this video, I want to announce one more time that we are doing a Schnee subscriber meetup at Sakura Con in Seattle, Friday, March 29th. I am so excited to meet all of you guys. Follow me on Twitter at JD_Schnee for updates about specific time and place for the meetup. Note that you do not need to be an attendee of the con to come to the meetup. I'll be holding it outside of that zone, but also since it's a super fun convention, I'm going to leave the registration link in the comments and the cards. Support the channel on Patreon. Huge thanks to all the patrons. Shout out specifically to Self-Fogus, new high tier patron. Thank you everyone for all the support. You're all amazing. Fairly short video. I think that's all I have to say about Dune for now. Next topic will be Has Been Hotel, so stay tuned for that. Hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.